The sky over Earth was dark, a deep shade of black, as if it knew what was coming. Something was wrong. People were looking up, and they felt it. The air felt thick, heavy with a sense of impending doom. Then, in an instant, it happened. The first alien ship breached the atmosphere, its massive silhouette cutting through the clouds like a knife. A deep hum vibrated through the ground, and soon the whole sky was filled with alien vessels. They were the HFY, once considered unbeatable in every corner of the galaxy, feared by all who had encountered them. For years, humans had prepared for any kind of alien invasion, building massive defense systems and creating new weapons. But nothing could have prepared them for what they were facing now. These weren't just any aliens. These were apex predators who had wiped out entire civilizations without breaking a sweat. Their technology was advanced beyond anything humanity had ever seen, and their strength was unimaginable. As their ships descended onto Earth, Earth's defenses were powerless. The sky was filled with bright flashes of light, explosions, and the earth-shaking roar of weapons that seemed to come from every direction. Humanity's greatest defenses were wiped out in minutes, their best fighters falling like flies. Chaos spread across the globe. People screamed, ran, and fought back with whatever weapons they could find. But it was clear, it was hopeless. The HFY were too powerful, too fast, and they showed no mercy. They tore through cities, leaving nothing but destruction in their wake. People didn't have time to even think, let alone defend themselves. They ran for shelter, but even that felt pointless. How do you hide when the sky itself is your enemy? In the heart of this devastation stood Bonner, a soldier who had fought in countless battles. He was no stranger to war, but this was unlike anything he had ever faced. The alien ships were everywhere, and the air smelled of fire and metal. Bonner and his team had been given one mission: buy enough time for the civilians to escape to safety. It was a mission that no one had ever expected to be so important, but now it was all that mattered. The civilian transports were already taking off, and if Bonner's team didn't hold the line, the human race would have no chance. Bonner shouted orders to his team. They took cover behind destroyed vehicles and rubble, aiming their weapons at anything that moved. The HFY soldiers were everywhere, tall and monstrous, their black armored bodies practically glowing in the dim light. With every movement, their weapons unleashed devastating firepower that destroyed entire buildings in seconds. Bonner's team fired back, but their weapons seemed like nothing more than firecrackers compared to the aliens' heavy artillery. Still, they held their ground, refusing to give up. The team moved like a well-trained unit, coordinating their attacks and providing cover for the civilians who were making their way to the evacuation points. But the sound of explosions and gunfire only grew louder. Bonner's heart pounded in his chest, his every instinct screaming to fight harder, to push back against this unstoppable force. But the truth was clear: they were losing. The enemy was too strong. The destruction was too overwhelming. Bonner knew that he and his team could only hold the line for so long before they were overrun. As more alien ships arrived, the ground beneath Bonner's feet began to shake. The air was thick with smoke and the acrid smell of burning metal. He could hear the screams of people running for their lives. Every explosion felt like it was getting closer, the sound deafening, overwhelming. He turned to his team. "Keep moving. We have to protect them." His voice was hoarse from the smoke, but he knew they couldn't stop now. They had to buy time. Even if it meant sacrificing themselves, they had to give humanity a chance to survive. Then, as the last of Earth's defenses crumbled before the HFY's might, something unexpected happened. A sudden, strange signal cut through the chaos, faint at first, but then clearer. It wasn't an alien transmission. It was human. The signal was a message, and it was coming from somewhere in space. Bonner's heart skipped a beat as he heard the words. "We have a weapon that can stop them. The tide can be turned, but only if you can make it long enough." Bonner's eyes widened. A weapon, a chance to turn the tide. He barely had time to process the message before another explosion rocked the area. The HFY forces were closing in, and their attack was relentless. The mysterious signal was humanity's only hope, but would they be able to survive long enough to find it? And if they did, could this weapon truly change the course of the war? The feeling of desperation hung in the air. Bonner knew they were running out of time. He motioned to his team. "We've got to hold on, just a little longer. The signal is our only chance." But even as he said the words, a cold dread filled his heart. The odds were against them, and every second counted. Would they find the weapon in time? Would humanity survive? The fate of the world now depended on the unknown, on the hope that somewhere, somehow, humanity had a secret weapon that could defeat the HFY. As the battle raged on, Bonner and his team pushed forward, each step more dangerous than the last. The aliens were closing in, but the thought of that mysterious signal, the hope it represented, kept them going. They fought with everything they had, not just for survival, but for the future of the human race. The HFY had achieved what no other race had managed before, an overwhelming victory. They had crushed humanity's defenses with ruthless precision, showing no mercy. From their flagship, high above the earth, the HFY watched in satisfaction as their forces systematically destroyed everything in their path. Cities burned. Entire nations crumbled. They believed that their victory was inevitable, that humanity was nothing more than an insignificant speck beneath their boots. To them, the humans were weak, incapable of fighting back against their might. They had crushed other civilizations before, and this time, it seemed like it would be no different. They laughed at the resistance put up by the humans. Their commanders, massive and imposing, exchanged cruel smiles as they prepared for the final assault. The last of humanity's strongholds were about to fall, and with that, their world would be theirs. They were ready to wipe the last remnants of human life off the face of the earth and claim it as their own. There was no turning back. But even in the face of total annihilation, there was one thing the HFY had underestimated: the willpower of humanity. On Earth, in the midst of the chaos, human soldiers and scientists were scrambling to make sense of the mysterious signal that had been sent during the battle. They had barely had time to process its contents before they were thrown into a full-scale war, but now, the signal's message was the only hope left. It hinted at a weapon, something capable of turning the tide of the war. The problem: no one knew exactly what it was, and time was running out. Desperation was growing. Every hour that passed without progress meant more civilians lost, more destruction, and closer to humanity's extinction. Yet, amidst the wreckage and uncertainty, the human team that was investigating the signal discovered something they hadn't expected: a long-lost piece of technology from a previous human mission to a distant galaxy. It wasn't much, but it was something. Cloaking devices. These devices, capable of rendering entire battalions invisible to the HFY's advanced scanners, had been abandoned after the mission ended. The cloaking technology was ancient by human standards, but it was still functional, and it could be the key to humanity's survival. If they could use it to infiltrate the HFY flagship, they might just have a chance to plant the weapon that could defeat them. But the task was almost impossible. The HFY flagship was heavily guarded, surrounded by an impenetrable defense network, and packed with the strongest forces the aliens had. There was no room for error. Even a single misstep would mean certain death. Bonner, who had been leading his team through the desperate defense of Earth, now stood at the forefront of this new mission. His mind raced with possibilities and risks as he looked over the cloaking device, one of humanity's last hopes. He knew that this mission was their final shot. There was no plan B. The HFY were too strong, and Earth's last remaining forces were too few. This was humanity's last stand. As Bonner prepared his team, a heavy silence fell over the group. They knew what was at stake. Each of them was ready to face death, but they also understood the immense pressure of their mission. They weren't just fighting for survival. They were fighting for the future of every human being left on Earth. Failure was not an option. The cloaking devices would allow them to slip past the alien scanners, but they could only use them for a short time. If they didn't make it to the flagship in time, or if the cloaking failed, they would be exposed, and the mission would be over before it even began. Bonner checked his gear one last time. His team was composed of the best soldiers Earth had left, but even they knew they were facing an enemy they couldn't defeat with sheer force. They had to be smart, they had to be quick, and they had to be lucky. As they prepared to move out, Bonner shared one final word with his team. We are humanity's last hope. We don't just represent ourselves, but everyone who is counting on us. We can't afford to fail. The team nodded, understanding the gravity of the mission. They were going to infiltrate the heart of the Xarth K's power, a place where even the bravest of soldiers had never dared to go. The flagship, a massive, ominous structure floating high above Earth, was a fortress. It was where the Xarth Kai leadership resided, where their war strategy was decided, and where the future of the human race could either be sealed or saved. The plan was simple: infiltrate the flagship, plant the weapon, and get out before the cloaking device failed. The challenge was far from simple, though. The flagship was filled with highly trained Xarth Kai warriors, advanced artificial intelligence systems, and a maze of defenses designed to detect any intrusion. The cloaking device would be their only advantage. Without it, they would never make it inside. As they boarded the stealth craft that would take them toward the flagship, Bonner's thoughts turned to the civilians they had left behind. He couldn't help but think of the families, the children, and the old men and women who had trusted them to keep them safe. Every second they spent outside of Earth's defenses was a second closer to the end. He had to succeed. They all had to succeed. The ship hummed quietly as it lifted off, disappearing into the dark skies above. Bonner couldn't shake the feeling that the Xarth Kai knew what was coming. Their confidence was apparent, and it made them dangerous. They believed humanity had no chance, that the end was near, and that nothing could stop them. But Bonner knew something they didn't. Humanity might have been underestimated, but they had something the Xarth Kai could never fully understand: determination, courage, and the ability to fight even when all seemed lost. The final assault from the Xarth Kai would come soon, but humanity wasn't ready to go down without a fight. And as the stealth craft sped toward the enemy flagship, Bonner could feel the weight of the moment. This was their last chance. Would they succeed? Or would the Xarth K's overconfidence be their downfall? The battlefield was no longer quiet. The Xarth Kai, once a terrifying and unstoppable force, were now thrown into chaos. Their ships, which had dominated Earth's skies for days, now drifted aimlessly. The EMP strike had done its work, disabling the alien fleet's advanced systems. For the first time since the invasion began, the Xarth Kai found themselves vulnerable. Their superior technology, once their greatest weapon, was now their greatest weakness. As their ships flickered and their weapons went offline, panic spread through their ranks. The mighty Xarth Kai were no longer the predators. They were the prey. The alien soldiers, accustomed to overwhelming their enemies with sheer force, now struggled to adapt to the unexpected turn of events. The Xarth Kai warriors, who once moved with mechanical precision, now acted out of desperation. They couldn't understand how a species they had deemed inferior had managed to cripple them so thoroughly. On the ground, Earth's forces, though battered and bruised, quickly seized the advantage. Humanity had been pushed to the edge, but now they had a glimmer of hope. The EMP had turned the tide in their favor. Humanity's last remaining strength, bolstered by advanced robots and AI-enhanced weapons, surged forward in a relentless counterattack. The enemy might have had superior technology, but humanity had something far stronger: the will to survive. Human soldiers, led by Bonner, fought with fury. Their weapons, powered by AI, sliced through the alien soldiers with deadly accuracy. Advanced robots, now in full control of the battlefield, tore through the disorganized Xarthkai forces with mechanical precision. But even in the face of victory, the cost of this war had been immense. Bonner's team, though stronger than ever, had suffered great losses. They had pushed deeper into enemy territory, inching closer to their ultimate goal, the defeat of the Xarthkai leader. The alien Supreme Commander, the mastermind behind the invasion, still held the final key to humanity's fate. Bonner knew this. His team knew this. And though they had taken heavy losses, they knew this was their moment. But this battle was far from over. The Xarthkai leader had not yet shown his true strength. As Bonner and his team fought their way to the heart of the enemy stronghold, they encountered a new level of resistance. The alien commander had unleashed his elite warriors, a terrifying force of genetically enhanced soldiers, all eager to protect their leader at any cost. They clashed with Bonner's team in brutal close-quarters combat, their weapons and armor far stronger than anything the human soldiers had encountered before. With every step forward, the human team lost more members. The Xarthkai were relentless, and as the battle raged on, the survivors of Bonner's squad became fewer, but they fought on, driven by the knowledge that humanity's future rested on their success. Bonner, though gravely injured, remained at the front. His determination was unwavering. He knew the importance of their mission. This wasn't just about defeating an enemy. This was about securing the future for every human still alive. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Bonner and his remaining team members reached the command center, where the Xarthkai Supreme Commander awaited them. The alien leader stood tall, his imposing figure a testament to the power he had wielded in this war. He was unlike any of the Xarthkai soldiers they had faced. His armor was a deep, dark metal, adorned with symbols of his dominance over the galaxy. His eyes burned with an unholy rage, and as he sized up Bonner, he knew this would be a battle like no other. Bonner's pulse raced as he faced the alien commander. His body was battered, his wounds were deep, but his resolve remained unbroken. This was it. This was the moment that would decide humanity's fate. The fight between them would determine if Earth would survive, or if the Xarthkai would conquer it completely. No matter what happened, Bonner knew he could not afford to lose. The battle began with a clash of titans. Bonner swung his weapon, the blade cutting through the air with a hum. The Xarthkai leader parried with unnatural speed, his weapon a blur of deadly force. Each strike felt like a battle for life itself. Bonner could feel the weight of his fatigue pulling at him, but he refused to slow down. Every ounce of his strength was poured into each swing, every calculated move. He knew that if he hesitated for even a second, it could mean the end. The fight was brutal. The Xarthkai commander's attacks were precise and overwhelming. His strikes were calculated to cause maximum pain, and Bonner felt every hit. His armor was scratched and dented, his body beginning to show the toll of the battle. The ground beneath them trembled with each clash, as though even the planet itself could feel the violence unfolding. But Bonner's determination was unwavering. He wasn't just fighting for himself. He was fighting for every person on Earth, every life that had been lost, every person who had trusted him to protect them. It all fueled his every movement. He fought with the kind of raw willpower that only humanity could possess. The alien commander might have had strength and skill, but Bonner had something far greater, a reason to fight. The battle dragged on. Sweat mixed with blood as Bonner pushed forward. The pain in his body was immense, but he refused to give up. He couldn't afford to. With one final desperate swing of his blade, Bonner disarmed the alien leader. The Xarthkai commander staggered back, his confidence shaken for the first time in the battle. Bonner saw his chance. With a swift, brutal motion, Bonner lunged forward, stabbing his blade deep into the alien commander's chest. The leader let out a strangled scream as he crumpled to the ground, his life slipping away. For a moment, everything went silent. The Xarthkai soldiers, once so confident, now stood in shock. Their leader had fallen. Bonner, barely able to stand, looked around at the wreckage of the battlefield. The fight wasn't over yet, but they had won a crucial victory. The tide had turned. Humanity had shown the Xarth-K that they were not to be underestimated. Bonner collapsed to his knees, his body screaming in pain. But as he looked around at the fallen Xarth-K and his comrades, he felt a strange sense of relief. The battle was far from over, but they had dealt a blow that would echo through the stars. Humanity had fought back, and the Xarth-K would never forget it. The tension on the battlefield was unbearable. Bonner, though on the edge of collapse, stood tall, his sword still gripped tightly in his hand. The Xarth-K leader lay before him, blood oozing from the wound that had sealed his fate. For a moment, time seemed to slow. The air was thick with the smell of burning debris and the metallic scent of blood. The fight had been long and brutal, but now, at last, the outcome was clear. The Xarth-K leader's arrogance had been his undoing. He had underestimated humanity, thinking them weak and unworthy of standing against his empire. Now, as the leader's life drained away, Bonner knew the victory was complete. His comrades, those who had fought and fallen alongside him, had not died in vain. The alien invaders had been brought to their knees by the very species they thought they could destroy. Bonner's body ached with every breath, but he couldn't stop now. Not when he had come so far. Not when Earth had come so close to losing everything. The final confrontation was not just for him. It was for every soldier who had fought, for every family that had been torn apart, for every human who had hoped, prayed, and sacrificed. The Xarth-K forces were beginning to unravel. Their leader, the source of their coordination and strength, was dead. Without his guidance, the alien army was in disarray. Communications between their ships broke down. Their soldiers lost their discipline. Panic spread like wildfire among their ranks. It was as if the heart of their military had been ripped out. And now, they were simply a mass of chaos and confusion. Bonner, though still fighting against his exhaustion, watched as the Xarth-K warriors turned and fled. They had been a fearsome force, but now, they were nothing more than frightened animals. Their once pristine ships, which had unleashed untold destruction on Earth, were now retreating, their engines sputtering in disarray. The remaining soldiers, leaderless and broken, began to scatter, desperate to escape the wrath of humanity's newfound strength. The battlefield, once a place of horror and death, began to clear. The loud explosions, the cries of battle, and the roaring engines of alien war machines faded into the distance. The Xarth-K were retreating, not in an orderly fashion, but in sheer panic. They had underestimated humanity, and now it was their downfall. Bonner looked around, his heart heavy with both pride and sorrow. The victory had come, but at such a terrible cost. The streets were littered with the bodies of fallen soldiers, both human and alien. The sky, once darkened by the alien fleet, was now clear, but the damage to Earth was visible everywhere. Cities lay in ruins, homes destroyed, and countless lives had been lost. Humanity had survived, but it had paid a heavy price. As Bonner stood there, his sword still in hand, he felt a deep sense of loss. His team was gone. His friends, his brothers and sisters in arms, had given everything for this moment. Their sacrifice had allowed humanity to stand victorious, but it didn't feel like a win, not in the traditional sense. There was no celebration, no joy in the air, only the quiet aftermath of a war that had cost too much. The retreat of the Xarth-K forces sent a ripple of disbelief through the human soldiers who had survived. They had faced the impossible, and now they were watching the enemy flee. It was a sight that no one would have believed possible just days before. The alien invaders, who had once seemed unstoppable, were now running in fear. Humanity had not only fought back, but had delivered a blow so powerful that the very foundation of the Xarth-K Empire was shaken. Earth's military commanders, still reeling from the destruction, began to regroup. Their ships, damaged but still operational, hovered over the cities, watching the retreating alien forces. The ground forces, though exhausted and battle-worn, gathered together, their morale slowly rebuilding as they realized what had been accomplished. They had faced extinction, but they had overcome it. Bonner, though weary beyond belief, allowed himself a brief moment of reflection. He thought of the countless lives lost, of the civilians who had been evacuated, of the soldiers who had fought by his side. They had all given everything for this victory, and now, though the war was won, the weight of it all was beginning to settle in. The HFY had failed. They had come to Earth with arrogance, believing that humanity would fall before them. But now, their empire was broken, their forces scattered. The invaders who had once loomed so large in the sky were now little more than fleeing cowards. And Earth, battered and broken as it was, stood resilient. But the victory was bittersweet. For Bonner, the cost of this war would never fade. The faces of his fallen comrades would haunt him forever. The world may have been saved, but at what price? As the last of the HFY ships disappeared into the depths of space, humanity took its first steps toward rebuilding. Earth had survived, but the scars of the invasion would remain. The victory was hard-won, but it was a victory nonetheless. Humanity had proven that, even in the face of overwhelming odds, they would never give up. The HFY had underestimated them, and now they were paying the price. Bonner, exhausted and injured, looked to the horizon. There was still much work to be done, but for now he allowed himself to rest. The fight was over, and humanity had won. The HFY were gone. Earth was still standing, and that, in the end, was all that mattered. The dust was slowly settling over Earth. The once chaotic battlefields were now quiet, the echoes of war fading into the background. Where once there had been destruction, there was now a glimmer of hope. Earth, though scared and battered, stood resilient, rising from the ashes of its greatest challenge. It had survived the onslaught of the HFY, and now humanity had to rebuild, to honor the fallen, and to ensure that their sacrifices were never forgotten. In the aftermath of the battle, the world began to heal. Cities that had once been reduced to rubble were now being reconstructed. Humans, determined and united, worked together to rebuild their homes, their lives, and their future. There was no time for grief. At least not yet. The victory was fresh, but so was the loss. The wounds were still deep, but the fire of survival burned bright within every heart. Among the many memorials that sprang up across the globe, one stood tall above all others, a monument dedicated to Bonner and his team. The names of those who had given their lives for Earth were carved into the stone, a testament to their bravery and sacrifice. Bonner's face, immortalized in bronze, looked out over the land he had fought to protect. His eyes, though still, seemed to carry the weight of the battle and the hope of a future he would never see. It was a somber day when the memorial was unveiled. Bonner's comrades stood in front of it, their eyes fixed on the statue. The faces of the soldiers who had fought by his side were lined with the weight of grief, but also with pride. They had lost so much, yet they had won everything. Their fallen brothers and sisters would never be forgotten. As they stood in silence, the memories of the battle flooded back. The roar of alien ships, the clash of weapons, the sacrifices made, all of it was still fresh in their minds. But now, there was something else to hold on to. The knowledge that humanity had proven itself. It had fought against an empire that seemed unstoppable and had emerged victorious. They were no longer the weak, defenseless species that the galaxy had once thought them to be. They were warriors. The galaxy had watched Earth from afar, and for centuries, humanity had been underestimated. They had been viewed as prey, as a species too fragile to stand against the advanced forces of alien civilizations. But now, that perception had been shattered. The HFY, once thought to be unbeatable, had been driven from Earth. The victory over such a powerful force had sent shockwaves throughout the galaxy. Humanity was no longer seen as an insignificant speck in the universe. They were now respected, feared, and recognized as a force to be reckoned with. Bonner's sacrifice had been the catalyst for this change. His willingness to fight, to face impossible odds, had inspired not only his fellow soldiers, but also the entire human race. His bravery had become a symbol of what humanity was capable of when pushed to the edge, and his team, who had followed him into battle, had proven that they were willing to give everything for the survival of their world. In the quiet aftermath of the battle, as humanity began to rebuild, there was also a growing sense of responsibility. The victory over the HFY was not the end. It was just the beginning. The alien forces had been driven off, but there were still threats out there in the stars, threats that would one day find their way to Earth. Humanity's victory had shown that they could fight, but they also needed to be ready for whatever came next. Bonner's team, though now broken by the losses they had suffered, stood together one last time in front of the memorial. Their eyes were red from days of mourning, but there was something more in their gaze now: determination. They had lost their leader, their friends, but they had gained something far more valuable: the strength to stand tall, no matter the odds. As the survivors stood there, the wind gently blowing through the trees, one of them spoke up. "Bonner wouldn't have wanted us to mourn forever. He'd want us to keep going, to make sure this victory wasn't for nothing." Another soldier nodded, wiping away a tear. "We'll carry on. We'll protect Earth, just like he would have." And with that, the group turned and walked away from the memorial, their steps heavy but resolute. They were the new guardians of Earth. They would carry Bonner's legacy forward, making sure that humanity's victory was never forgotten, and that the sacrifices of those who had fallen were honored. Above them, the sky was clear, the stars shining brightly. Earth's defense fleet, battered but still intact, was preparing for the next challenge. It was a reminder that, even though they had won this battle, the war for humanity's survival was far from over. The galaxy had seen what humanity could do, but there were other empires, other forces, who might come to test them again. The final shot in the distance showed a faint silhouette, an alien ship retreating into the vastness of space. The HFY had been defeated, but their departure did not mark the end of humanity's journey. Earth was safe, for now, but the universe was a vast, unpredictable place. Humanity had earned its place among the stars, and now they would be ready for whatever came next. As Earth's defense fleet ascended into the vastness of space, ready to face whatever threats awaited them, a new chapter in humanity's story began. The scars of the past would remain, but so too would the strength, resilience, and unity that had brought them through the darkest days. The legacy of Bonner and the soldiers who fought beside him would live on, not just in stone monuments, but in the hearts of every human who looked up at the stars and remembered what they had fought for. Earth was still standing. Humanity had proven its strength, and the universe had been put on notice.